Well, there's a new survey finding that 7 out of 10 millennials need financial help from their parents. That's not news per se, but here's the thing. Men, particularly men, they're cashing into the bank of mom and dad a whole lot more. Here to discuss, Fox Nation host David Webb. David, shares of adults, early adults, millennial men and women who get support from their parents. Groceries, men 40%. Women, 23%. Vacations, I mean, I'm not sure why you're going on vacation when you don't have money. 36%, 17%. Rent, 33%, 15%. Student loans, 32%, 14%. What's going on with millennial men?
Well, two of those things you just said. Why are you kind of quipped, why are you going on vacation if you don't have money? And what about the student loan? What are the decisions you're making that put you there? Look, some people are going to say it's sexist, but guys, what happened to the alpha male fight to get ahead in life, make the right logical decision? You can get to some of the things you love later on, the things my father taught me. What is it that's going to get you there so you can afford to do what else you want to do when you get there? Problem is we've got too many kids raised, and males are no longer, frankly, acting like men, and in a good way, acting like men.
Well, that gets into the toxic masculinity argument.
Right, you've been feminized to the point where your masculinity's gone. It's also your decision.
But you're saying feminizing, yet it's the women who are actually stepping up to the plate. So is that the wrong word for it? Is there a different way to describe that?
Well, look, that's the left's word, toxic masculinity. They love that little cover phrase. Look, women mature typically faster than men at a younger age. And I think that gives them a good advantage in that they're making more logical decisions. Men catch up a little bit later. We were all young once. I know me a lot longer than you. You make those decisions in your 20s.
Okay, so you don't think, but something has changed though, right? And also the longer term ramifications of something like this, because, listen, we understand that the Great Recession was tougher on male dominated jobs, right? Construction, manufacturing, those things are coming back, but there's something else it feels like, and I feel like maybe some of these young guys are boxed in, and from what you call, traditional roles to what they think their roles may be in this sort of new set of circumstances. Could that be hurting?
That is a big part of this, Charles. The culture has changed, and not always in a good way. Men need to remember that they have to think like men, which means, by the way, you don't go against women, but you recognize your role in life. And the culture's now turned men into being the enemy. They've turned men, some, I'm not saying all, have turned men into being the enemy and the second class.
When I hear you, it reminds me when I was growing up, it was an old-fashioned kind of thing where my father worked, my mother took care of the house, and he was considered, quote, a man because we had a roof over our heads, he had a car,
he was a provider.
That traditional role. People are saying that's shattered. That doesn't exist anymore.
Well, instead of turning it upside down, which is what some want to do, why don't you do it the right way, which is women have advanced. They're in the boardrooms. They're on the construction site. They have every right to be there, and they're doing a good job of it. But when you turn it upside down and you push men down to raise women up, you're not really going for equality. Let women have advanced. Men have been depressed to some degree. Not all of them. Look, the majority of men are taking care of their business
out there. Some would argue, though, that what you're saying is so long overdue that you have to do that. In other words, it should be a concerted effort to elevate women. If you have a woman and a man, I think right now, if the S&P 500, less than 10 CEOs are women. So they're saying there should be a concerted effort that if they're equally skilled to bring the woman up to make up for 50 or 100 years of disadvantage and oppression or sexism.
Absolutely not. You don't make people equal by creating false inequality. What you do is you continue to advance the roles of women naturally, organically, and based on their capability. You don't depress one to raise the other. That creates a next level inequality.
Well, let me bring in a millennial male that we both know and admire. He's Turning Point USA's founder and CEO, Charlie Kirk. Charlie, we're having this discussion because the numbers are really astounding. They really are. The differences between millennial men and women. Men are getting 40% of them are getting help on groceries, whereas their women are only getting 23%. The numbers are shocking. What happened to millennial men? Is this something temporary? Is this a different change? What's going on?
When you look into the data, it's interesting. Actually, more than 50% of college graduates now are women. Most of the doctorate degrees, 15 out of 16 of the last years, were women. Actually, women in their 20s in the major cities in America earn far more than men in their 20s. Now, as they move into their 30s and 40s, as some women make the choice voluntarily to exit the workforce to have children and raise a family, men will then rise in the corporate ladder appropriately. But unfortunately, some people on the left try to demagogue these statistics and this data to try to say that there's a gender wage gap. And you actually look at the data, when you count education, when you count work experience, and you factor all those in, it nearly disappears altogether.
Right.
And your point is exactly right, Charles. Is that there is some data here that actually shows that men are doing worse in their 20s than women are.
And that's the question I'm asking, because I know the traditional debate, and that's another perhaps topic, but in the sense that even with student loans, 32% of men rely on mom and dad to help them out with that. We're only 14% of women. So the women are getting out there. They're finding their way. They're getting jobs. They're paying their bills on their own. They're not staying home with mommy and daddy in the basement. Listen, I don't know if you guys know the grass eater phenomenon that occurred in Japan. Many think it's happening in this country, where just young men have lost focus. You know, they kind of play these video games, don't have as much hope. Is there sort of another psychological part to this that Charlie, that you see, because you talk to these kids all the time?
Well, look, I will say that there is a cultural trend, and I think this new unfortunate rise of third wave feminism is much more about hating men than empowering women. And it is possible to empower women without hating men. That is possible. And, you know, men, at least in recent college graduates that are males, unfortunately, are not given the same sort of direction that I think they should be. And I think there's too many men actually going to college. I think there's too many people in general going to four-year college, where the trades, the electricians, the plumbers, the carpenters, the HVAC, and the entrepreneurs are somehow being thought of as less dignified, when in reality, they're just as important, if not more important, than some of these other jobs that somehow are put on a pedestal. And I think the Trump administration has done a great job of talking about this.
And before you came on, we were talking about it, just the idea at one point, no matter whether you're a man or a woman, if you were a provider, the fact you had a roof over your head, food in your belly, was always seen as a positive. David, Charlie, thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
All right, Charles.
Hey, new reports finding that Trump's North American